Hey everybody, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the very basics of functions within Google Sheets. What is a function though? It sounds like a really difficult name to deal with, but a function is just something that allows you to do some kind of mathematical process or maybe some kind of test on certain criteria within your spreadsheet. So for example, a function could be adding two cells together. The function could also be checking to see if a certain condition exists, such as, is that cell blank? If it is, then this. So that's kind of the idea of a function at a very high level. Now inside of Google Sheets, let's look at it here. You can access all of the functions by clicking this icon right here that says functions. And you can see that there's quite a bit. If I go to all, we can just scroll for quite a while, and these are all different functions. So for example, if I go to info, there's one called isText, which basically just checks the cell to see if it's text or is it numbers or something else, a date, time, for example. So that's where you can access those functions. Now, in our case, though, we have this spreadsheet here, and we have all of these values from column F, so F2 right here, all the way down to F16. And we want to add those up. And I'll be honest with you guys, a long time ago, I would have been sitting there with an iPhone or whatever I had at the time, calculator. Gosh, I'm getting old. And I would have sat there and gone, okay, 128,000, 512,110. Oops, I made a typo. So in our case, let's go ahead and fix that. So instead of having to add all of these manually, we'll go down to where it says total. That's where we want our added up total to be. We'll click on that cell. Now to do functions, you can click this functions button, but what I prefer is start with the equal sign. That's how we'll start with all functions. So we'll start with equals, and then we'll type in whatever we want that function to be. Now, this is the part you do have to kind of memorize some of the function names. Typically, you'll just remember a couple that are very common for you, but the most common is sum, S-U-M. So it's just adding things. Now, in this case, all I did was type an equal sign, and Google Sheets was smart enough to guess that I was going to add things up. So it put equals sum, parentheses, F2 through F16, and it put the through is that colon. So you put F2 through colon F16. So you can see the orange area, this is showing us what it's adding. So it's adding all of these. Now, if I just hit enter, there you go. It added them for me. I didn't even put in a function. All I did was type equals and hit the enter key. Now let's say we want to change this though, because maybe it's not right or we just want to do it differently. What we can do is we can click on the cell that has that function applied to it. And we know it has a function applied to it because when we highlight that cell, we see up here, we see a function listed here. And in our case, if we click on that middle part where it has value, this is really helpful. It actually shows us the syntax for that function. It says basically how you use it. So for example, we see it says, let's actually delete the first part of this. Let's start over. So it says sum, we need to put a value, and it gives us an example. It says if you want to add cells A2 through A100, type this. And then we can also insert a comma and add other values on top of that. So for example, let's do a very basic one. Let's add, let's do F2. So I'm going to type F2 and I'll add, let's do a comma. So we'll put in another value. Let's do, how about F, what is this, 12. So we'll do F12. And now all we have to do is close that with a parentheses. So we'll close that, we press enter, there's that value. If I click on it and go back to the value, we can see it actually highlights when we click on each of these which values we're adding. So that's one way that you can add multiple cells, even if they're not perfectly in a row. You can say, okay, add F2 through F10, and, so we can do comma, A10 through A20, for example. So that's a very easy way to do this. Now let me delete that. That was one very simple example. Let's do, in this case, let's find the average. That's an interesting one. Let's find the average of all of these cells. To do that, we can use the average function. So we can type equals, and this time we'll actually start typing average. And we see it pops up here. It says numerical average value in a data set ignoring text. So if we click that, guess what again? It shows us the exact syntax for how to use this function. Now in my case, again, it's guessing correctly that I want to average all of these, but if you didn't want it to do that, you could say, I want you to average these. And then to close it out, we just do the closing parentheses and hit enter. And it averaged out these values instead of the ones it was guessing. So I just wanted to point that out because sometimes people get confused about how do I tell it to do something else. So in this case, I'm actually going to remove that. We'll go back to how it was. So we have equals average parentheses, and let's go ahead and select the proper area. There we go. And again, we'll close that with the parentheses and hit enter. And so now our formula is now equals average F2 through F16, and we see that the average is 723,000. So that's pretty awesome. Now we can do other things with this. For example, we could say, let's do how many over 100K. So in this case, let's go ahead and say how many reps earned over $100,000 in revenue for the company. What we can do is we can use another formula. We could say equals count IF. So this is a conditional count across a range of values. So if I open up a parentheses there, it asks for a range. And I will do same thing we did before. I'll select our range and I'll close that there with, I'll put a comma because again, you want to kind of follow the syntax here. It tells you count IF, range, comma, criterion. And my criteria in this case is going to be similar to this one right here. See, it shows an example here. It shows parenthesis, or I'm sorry, a quotation mark. And I want to do over 100,000. And it is important that you make this match the format. So I'm going to do over 100, I'll do the $sign, $100,000. And we'll close that with another quote and then a parenthesis and hit enter. There we go. It actually went through all of our cells and found how many reps earned over $100,000 and told us that value. All right, so that's all I got for you. I hope you found this useful. If so, make sure to smash that subscribe button, not the like button. Like button is good, but subscribe is better so that you get notifications on all my new content. I've got a ton coming out. I'm not joking, a ton. So make sure you subscribe for all of that goodness. So until next time, stay safe and healthy, and as always, stay nerdy.